And good evening now. Thanks for being with us on this Wednesday, February 15th, as we recap what happened in the courtroom today in the Alex Murdaugh double murder trial. That disgraced attorney accused of shooting and killing his wife Maggie and son Paul in June of 2021. Once we go over what happened in the courtroom today, we're going to be joined by our criminal defense attorneys for their take on the latest developments in court. Well, today's hearing was bookended by two decisions by Judge Newman on the admissibility of testimony on the roadside shooting. You may recall on Labor Day in 2021, Alex Murdaugh called 911 reporting that he had been shot in the head while changing a tire. Well, he later told SLED that he had Curtis Smith try to kill him so his surviving son Buster would receive life insurance money. Defense attorneys argued in court today that this incident is unrelated to the murder charges and shouldn't be allowed in as evidence. And Judge Newman agreed with their argument this morning. But some questions from the defense later in the day led the judge to reverse that decision. Take a listen.
During cross-examination, I find that the defense opened the door to all of that testimony by questioning the witness as to the relationship between Mr. Murdaugh and Eddie Smith, payment of money to buy drugs, indebtedness, his overall relationship, and in order to not mislead the jury and to, under the doctrine of completeness and fairness, the court reverses its decision and will allow examination of witnesses regarding that relationship.
Well, at this point tonight, it is unclear if prosecutors will call additional witnesses to testify about the roadside shooting. There was just two witnesses today, SLED agent David Owen being on the stand nearly all day. He is the SLED's lead investigator in this murder case. Prosecutors played a lengthy interview that Owen conducted with Murdaugh on August 11th of 2021, some 2 months after the murders. The recording was paused several times so prosecutors could ask Agent Owens about questions about that interview.
Have you confronted him with what you're about to ask him prior to this?
No, I had not.
And the question you had just asked him, did that deal with whether he went down to the kennels or not after supper?
Correct.
And he said he had not.
He had not.
And Maggie was heard in the background, and you were heard in the background, and that was prior to 9 p.m.
I heard Rogan Gibson ask me if I was up there. He said he thought it was me.
Was it you?
At 9 o'clock?
Yes, sir.
No, sir. Not if my times are right.
Who do you think it could have been?
I have no idea.
He was asked, of course, about the tape at the dog kennel, and Murdaugh denied that was his voice on the video. Several witnesses, though, have said otherwise, including Maggie Murdaugh's sister and brother-in-law and 2 of Paul's friends. At the end of that interview, the agent asked Murdaugh outright if he was responsible for the murders. Here's that exchange.
Did you kill Maggie?
No. Did I kill my wife?
Yes, sir.
No, David.
Do you know who did?
No, I do not know who did.
Did you kill Paul?
No, I did not kill Paul.
Do you know who did?
No, sir, I do not know who did. Do you think I killed Maggie?
I have to go where the evidence and the facts
I
take me.
understand that. And you think I killed Paul?
I have to go where the evidence and the facts take me, and I don't have anything that points to anybody else at this time.
So does that mean that I am a suspect?
You were still in, like I told Corey earlier, you were still in this.
Well, this afternoon, defense attorney Jim Griffin cross-examined the agent. Griffin questioned him on SLED's handling of the investigation, pointing out that SLED did not search his parents' home called Almeda until months after the murders.
Yes, sir.
You were asked number of what ifs. One what if was like, what if he hid the guns in Alameda? How long would that take? And you said 5 minutes, right?
I said 5 or 10 minutes, depending on if you know the area.
What if you had gone over there that night and searched Alameda? How long would that have taken?
Quite sometimes, large property.
And we would know today that there were no guns hidden on the property.
Well, that night, Alec was not considered a main suspect, and I had no information to go search Alameda for guns.
You may recall also there was a Snapchat video that was entered into evidence a couple of weeks ago showing Murdaugh wearing different clothing than he was wearing the night of the murders. Griffin asked the clothes Alex Murdaugh was wearing in the Snapchat video to the agent. Take a listen to that.
Up until August 11th, Alec had given you carte blanche to search anywhere, anytime on any property he had. Is that right?
That is correct.
And on August 11th, he was encouraging you to try to get information from General Motors, and he would do whatever he could to facilitate that exchange, right?
Yes.
And up until August 11th, I mean, you'd reached out to Alec, me, John Marvin, whenever you needed to go on property to do anything, and you always got consent, correct?
That is correct.
At no time prior to August the 11th, 2021, did you ask Alex Murdaugh, where's that blue shirt? Where are those khaki pants? Where are those shoes? Did you?
No, sir, I did not.
And you have never asked him for that blue shirt, those tan shoes, and those khaki pants, have you?
No, sir.
So, a lot to unpack. Our legal experts are with us now. Brian and Luke Shealy, local criminal defense attorneys. You've been following the case very, very closely. I don't really know where to start. Let's just dive in with the late afternoon decision by the judge in this case to allow the roadside shooting from Labor Day of 2021 into evidence. After first saying it would not be allowed, he reversed course before court ended today. Luke, how big of a deal is this?
Huge. Well, starting off the morning, it was a significant victory for the defense. Maybe the only one I think I can count of an evidentiary ruling where the judge just said simply that the roadside assisted shooting with Cousin Eddie was just too far removed. It was too prejudicial. We have very specific case law on that. You don't want a jury to get overwhelmed by the evidence of an attempted suicide unless it really connects to the crime at hand. So the judge ruled it out. And then the cross-examination, they said that Jim Griffin opened the door. Now, I don't know that I agree with that. And if you recall, and if the viewers recall, there was a lot of evidence put forth by the state to the financial analyst that Cousin Eddie was receiving about $50,000 a week, about approximately $500,000 of the missing trucking money from Alex Murdaugh. And so that was already out there. And so that's something that, in my view, that Jim Griffin had to address. He didn't bring up the roadside shooting. He just simply mentioned the name Cousin Eddie. And, of course, the state, being clever, said, hey, we think he's talking about something he shouldn't. And we think that opened the door. And then, for whatever reason that only Judge Newman knows, he said it did. And so they plowed right into that happily and scored some big points. That's pretty damaging for the defense after what otherwise would have been a very strong day for them.
Your take, Brian?
Yeah, it was a great move by the prosecution. We got a couple savvy prosecutors here that as soon as Cousin Eddie was mentioned, after they lost that evidentiary ruling outside the presence of the jury, and as soon as Griffin mentioned him, they pounced. And I tend to agree with my brother. The fact that you're addressing something the state has brought up concerning the financial aspects at play and how money is being transferred to Cousin Eddie is not opening the door to him trying to shoot you on the side of the road at your request. So that there's a difference there from our perspective, but kudos to the prosecutors for jumping on the moment, and what they get to do now is get a jury instruction on the fact that guilt can be inferred through a suicide if there's a nexus to the double murders. And so the state certainly will be saying, listen, when Alex Murdaugh gets in a bind, he resorts to violence. And again, he did it once with his own family, and then he tried to kill himself. And so that they will get to, most judges don't, at the state level at least, don't allow jury instructions to be written and have that back in the jury room. However, Judge Newman does. That's generally a practice of him, and so they will be able to hang on every written word of that instruction to infer guilt based on the suicide. So that was critical today.
Let's talk about the interview, August 11th of 2021, about 2 months or so after the slayings of Maggie and Paul Murdaugh. The jury gets to hear from Alex Murdaugh for the first time, really, in his own words, not on the witness stand, but on that videotape today. What did you guys hear on that videotape that might sway a jury one way or the other?
Well, pro tip, this is why you don't allow your client to be interviewed, because it's illustrated right here, and I will answer your question, but you have this largely circumstantial case, and most of what the prosecution today spent was pointing out inconsistencies that were only there because he agreed to give this interview. So it's just something that as lawyers you have to be very careful about. Even your smartest, most savviest, most confident lawyer defendant, if you go and talk, and if the police can show that you weren't exactly 100% right, whether it's a real lie or just a natural inconsistency, they will use that as evidence against you. But what I saw was clearly an interrogation. It was designed to kind of not look like an interrogation, but as the SLED agent testified today, he's allowed to use tricks. He's allowed to use some deceit under our law to try to get defendants to incriminate themselves. And so they were trying to probe on some of these issues about matching shell casings, about timeline problems, Snapchat videos, things like that. And then on the other hand, you saw Mr. Murdaugh again repeatedly at times get very upset. What would look to be real emotion, unless he's a narcissistic sociopath. So
Yeah, I'm looking at the tape. Our viewers can see the tape here. He's got his arms folded. He's not rocking back and forth, and he is actually questioning the investigator. Do you think I did this? Do you think I would do that? I mean, so he's like kind of being a little defiant here, I believe.
yeah, that was kind of towards the end. He had his kind of roller coaster of emotion and other questions, and then at the very end, the agent threw the Hail Mary saying, "Did you kill your wife? Did you kill your son?" He said, "No, no." And then he kind of put the question back to them. So I think he's either defiant because he's a criminal who is going to be defiant, or he's insulted that he's asked that question about his loved one. So it was fascinating, very interesting. The jury's going to have to really do their own assessment of what it means based on their life experiences.
And Brian, according to the testimony today, Murdaugh seemed very surprised that his son Paul had recorded a video down at the dog kennel in which several witnesses have testified that's Alex Murdaugh's voice among the other voices on that tape. He seemed a little surprised by that in that interview back in August of 2021.
Yes, again, this is why you don't go and allow yourself to be interrogated, even if you're, trained in the law, even if you're innocent. You just lawyer up and shut it down because, this is his third interview, and, this agent had accumulated more evidence. He was confronting Mr. Murdaugh about the evidence, and, you're never going to tell the same story 3 times the same way. So that was powerful that he's going to have to do some explaining about why he was so sticking to his guns on not being down there when clearly he was. He's going to have to explain that when he testifies. Luke did a pretty good analysis of how the state won so many different points by playing this video through the lead agent. But one thing I want to note that I found interesting, I guess, from a defense perspective, he was crying when the agent went on a bathroom break. He was there with his lawyer at the time, Corey Fleming, and he kind of broke down a little bit. And he said, I can do it. If I were a juror, I'd be looking closely at that. The other thing that caught my attention from a defense perspective, since Luke covered the prosecution, he took a call from Buster in the middle of the interview, and it was, his other living son, and he was attentive. He said, I just got to talk to Buster, and he seemed like a very concerned father. There was a lot of warmth there on the call with Buster. He wanted to make sure that he wasn't going to miss that call. And I found that to be fascinating, and I would be extrapolating from that if I were the defense team.
Again, the prosecution has been very methodical now. 3 full weeks of testimony presented by the prosecution here. Maybe another day or so left in their case. But they've been very methodical here, laying out the circumstantial evidence and the evidence that they say shows that Alex Murdaugh is a double murderer. You mentioned the defense today. Do you think that the defense scored any points today overall in this trial? In other words, how do you think they performed today when it came to the evidence that was presented in court?
I thought they were doing quite well up until the point that they lost their evidentiary ruling and opened the door. Jim Griffin, this is probably his strongest day in my opinion. Anytime you score some good points against the lead investigator, it's good. And 2 things that were highlights for me was he was able to show through the grand jury transcript. So he's got a transcript of what that officer testified to under oath to the grand jury. One, about blood spatter. He got him to admit that at the time that he testified under oath to the grand jury that he knew or should have known that the blood spatter showed there was no actual human blood. And of course the agent had to be like, well, I didn't really know at that time. Well, shouldn't you have known? Well, yes. But then even more powerful was he got the agent to admit that he used trickery when he was confronting Mr. Murdaugh with the fact that he, they said they found other shotguns loaded in the same way as would have killed Paul, which was the buckshot and the turkey load. And Jim Griffin did a really good job saying, look, you know that you didn't have that, but you confronted him all the same. And Agent Owen, to his credit, was like, well, we're allowed to, trick or lie, if you will, a criminal defendant to try to get what we need. And then Griffin did an even better job by going, but you did it to the grand jury as well. And what you say is, well, you're under oath. You were under oath then. And he said, well, I didn't mislead the grand jury, but you're under oath now too. So which one is it? Right. Are you misleading then or are you misleading now? So that was good. It was all really good for the defense until Judge Newman decided that Jim Griffin opened the door again.
And Brian, you believe the defense scored some points today?
I do. One thing that was maybe kind of lost in all of the dramatics of the cross-examination and examination of the lead case agent, if we note that this OnStar data was kind of put in today kind of with little fanfare, and it kind of through a technical witness, and then Jim Griffin, talking about points scored, was basically able to assert pretty confidently, and you've had an opportunity to look at this data, and you'd agree by reviewing it that Alex Murdaugh only took that truck, that Suburban that he was driving, down to the kennels after coming back from his mother's home, and Special Agent Owen had to agree with it. So that was pretty big. I mean, that's going to do a lot with the timeline. That does a lot in really shortening it, because he would have had to have gotten down there earlier, either a different way. So that was pretty key, and I think that kind of went under the radar today.
I've been reading some of the comments from our nightly chats here. Some of our viewers out there have their own ideas. They're saying, well, the prosecution is not doing enough to prove he killed Maggie and Paul Murdaugh. They're focused too much on the financial crimes. The defense not doing a good enough job. So lots of different opinions out there from viewers who have been watching this. What in the heck do you think is going through the mind of jurors right now? Because they've had to absorb all of this information now for 3 solid weeks.
Well, I thought a lot about this case, and I haven't come across this case as widely publicized or in which people, their opinions seem to be baked in kind of before the trial, because there's been so much to digest in terms of content for either side. Everybody kind of wants to maybe confirm their own opinions, but you would hope that through the jury selection process, they found jurors who haven't preformed opinions and they're just absorbing. I think that they have been overwhelmed with technical data. I think they probably enjoyed the real live witnesses that knew the Murdaughs, the housekeeper, the healthcare worker, Miss Smith, the family friends, even the guy that cleaned the kennels was wildly entertaining. So I think they're probably latching on more to that, and And then once all the evidence is closed, then they have to deliberate. So I think we're going to have a lot from the defense too. So.
Right. And Brian, let me add this. A lot of our viewers who have been watching say, oh, he's guilty as sin. They've already formed an opinion on the evidence that's been presented, and the defense hasn't even presented their case just yet. At this point, as a defense attorney, you're probably hoping the jury has not formed a final opinion just yet, with the defense still having to present their side of the story.
Yeah, JR, it's a unique trial because it's nationally televised. We're getting to see a lot of the arguments that are outside of the presence of the jury. The infidelity, that upset a lot of people. That never came in front of the jury. The financial crimes comes in. There's so much coverage over the years. Like my brother said, there's a lot of baked in kind of beliefs in what's going on. We haven't heard from the defense side yet. And if I were the jurors sitting there, just kind of taking this all in, what's important, what's not, with what they are able to consider, not the things that have been argued outside of their presence, I'd probably be, at this point of the case, less impressed with the financial crimes, honestly. Really interested in him trying to kill himself.
Right.
I'd be zeroing on that. And then I'd be thinking, so that would kind of weigh itself, one for, financial crimes. I think a lot of people are like, they're okay, but is that the motive to do it? But then that tied in with the suicide is why the state tried so hard with that. But then I'd be thinking about the evidence. Where are the guns? Where's the blood? Where's the bloody clothing? The agent today, went up and down the path to Alex Murdaugh's mother's home. They combed the woods. They searched the riverways. I mean, they didn't find this evidence. And, as poor of a showing as it was for Alex Murdaugh to be interviewed 3 times and be so inconsistent, he also was saying, what do you need? How can I help you? And so that, that plays to his advantage. So I'd be hyper-focused if I were the jurors on where's this evidence. We really need evidence. Why are we here? To weigh things that we can't see. Even the guns in evidence, which normally in a murder case, especially a double murder, you got the actual weapon. You don't need it, but so we had all these other items that just aren't in play, and so I'd be thinking about that. But certainly, the opening the door to the suicide is going to be have a major impact today.
We thought that the prosecution might rest their case today, and we thought that because the prosecution basically told us that they thought they would be wrapping their case by the middle of this week, which would be today. But here we go, another day of testimony tomorrow. Probably another day of testimony, I say, for the prosecution, because we don't know at this point if they have anybody they're going to put on the stand, if Cousin Eddie, as he's called, is going to take the witness stand tomorrow.
I know you want to talk about it.
I do. I mean, I think the fact that they were able to get the suicide information out through the really professional lead case agent, it must be that Cousin Eddie has too much baggage. They must be a little bit concerned about him on cross-examination. Cousin Eddie also would be presumably be able to be cross-examined by Jim Griffin or Dick Carpootlian on the kind of Ozark theory that we were talking about before, which apparently is what the defense is going to be plowing into in their examination today of the lead case agent. They were talking about the criminal element, the cowboy gangs, and what the agent was aware of in terms of debts owed to them and kind of the drug line, how Alex Murdaugh would get his pills. So the agent was not denying that. So I think, as maybe as enticing as it would be to put up Cousin Eddie for kind of direct evidence from Alex Murdaugh on the side of the road, I think he must be, a kind of slippery slope there. And I think they've got enough through their professional case agent.
Luke, do you think he's going to be on the stand tomorrow?
I don't, unless there's some late breaking midnight negotiations tonight to really make it appropriate, because even when they were arguing pre-trial this morning before the jury came in about whether they could even get into that assisted suicide stuff, Prosecutor Waters said, well, I just want to get it through the case agent, blah, blah, blah. So it wasn't like he was talking about getting that information through Eddie. So you want to end strong, which is why I don't know why they brought up that phone witness at the very end after what they would hope would be their strongest witness, which is the lead agent. So unless you're ending with Eddie, I think they're just going to get up and rest, and then we're going to be into the defense's case.
You think the defense starts tomorrow?
Absolutely.
Yes.
All right. Anything else we could chime in about while I have you here that you want to weigh in on?
How much time do you have?
Yeah, seriously, all right. Brian, Luke, Sheely, guys, criminal defense attorneys, thank you so very much for your expertise.
Thank you.
Testimony resumes tomorrow morning at 9:30, and you can watch it on all of our social media platforms. We've got you covered. Wall-to-wall coverage on our WLTX Plus channel, our YouTube channel, and WLTX.com. Again, 9:30 in the morning, testimony set to resume, and we'll see what the day holds. Of course, we will have live team coverage of what's happening in Walterboro on News 19 as well. We'll see you then.